you weren't in the country when these sniper killings took place in Washington in October 2002, and you came back and weren't aware really of the impact this had made. And I'm wondering what drew you to this story many years later and convinced you that this could be a film?
I was looking for a subject to make a Fast and Furious film, and I stumbled upon a blurb that described the Beltway sniper, explaining that it was the perpetrator. It's a little loud. The perpetrator were a father and son team that were actually father and son of adoption, and that immediately like jumped at me, and I saw the potential. I saw how by telling the story through that small angle, that intimate angle, we could, the whole story could have like a certain veneer of an allegory about the education of violence.
Well, Alex approached me with the idea, which I found hugely intimidating, because of I grew up on the East Coast, and the cultural resonance was sort of very in my head at all times, and so the idea of being able to tell a story sort of around and behind the headlines was very appealing, but the process of actually getting around those headlines and trying to find a private story, sort of that looked at the moments that were so intimate between these two people that they were even hypothetical at some points. That the idea that you could tell a story about them without necessarily seeing, with only implying the sort of the parts that everyone knew. It was exciting, but it sounded hard. It sounded super challenging.
First and foremost, it was very important that we gathered all the facts that we could, and so we did some extensive research and had access to the court document and all the police record, the medical record, and so we became very familiar with their background. And we went and visited all the crime scene around Washington, D.C., and that was particularly,
some of the most harrowing research that I've ever sort of done to actually try to be forensic about the characters that you were writing, and sort of examine the crime scenes and try to discover them from sort of literally from their point of view. Where was the car? Why did they choose this angle? At what time of day? But before that, the documents were the primary source. We started working on the film, or talking about the film, late in 2010. And so John Muhammad, the older gentleman, had been executed in 2009. Lee Malvo was serving consecutive life sentences and was very unavailable.
On my end, like almost really like a moral obligation to, no matter what, work with the fact, and then within those facts, we were at liberty to tell the story and choose the angle that we wanted into the story that serve our purposes. But all the all the fact, the construction was had to be righteous.
Yeah, when you dealing with a true story, one of the big questions, of course, is what you include. But the harder way to think of that question is what do you leave out, and how do you choose responsible omissions of material? Something a major choice that we made very early on was that we would not deal explicitly with the fact that John Muhammad was Muslim, and at times used that rhetoric in his sort of ideological language. Largely, I think, because that was the idea of sort of pigeonholing the story into just a sort of a story of Islamic extremism or something like that was very unattractive. There were so many more sort of subtle layers to it that would get completely hidden by that single thought. But in other cases, the omissions became essential parts of the character. The choice to make Lee extremely silent was something also that we came upon very, very early, and it was at times it seemed like a hard thing to commit to, especially on the page. A character can seem almost invisible without dialogue, which then made the casting so critical. But the idea of giving the film palpable absences not only helped us articulate or let us focus on the parts of the story that we found important, but also let us suggest this idea that maybe we didn't know everything.
The producer, Ison Robbins, comes, approached me and we were like, we're gonna have a casting director, and so which actor do you want in your film? And I was blown away because I thought that we were really gonna cast 2 people from the street, that day. And he was like, so who do you want? And I was like, well, can I pick anybody? And he was like, yeah. So I was like, I want Isaiah Washington. And
Is it true you sent him a copy of Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground?
Yeah, but that was after, like, then Eisen found him and contacted him, and he was like, he was lukewarm about the whole project. But so yeah,
So
I sent him.
Dostoevsky convinced him.
Exactly. He was like, no, don't worry, it's gonna be real depressing. Yeah.
That's the ticket. Yes.
Yeah.
Is it Tiquan? Actually, his audition happened over Skype, and it was instantly apparent, even through a fuzzy
Yeah.
SD.
So Skype and Facebook, that's the key word.
So this is a social media
Yeah.
movie.